the minutes from the November 18th meeting. I assume everybody had a chance to comment and provide feedback. Did anybody have questions on those minutes? No.
No.
Okay. So
No, I don't have any.
Can I entertain a motion to accept those minutes?
I move that we accept the meeting minutes for, I believe it was, oh, geez, I don't have them in front of me, November
18th. Yes.
November 18th.
Yep. Is there a second?
Aye.
Thanks, Gordon. All right. We'll take a roll call in terms of acceptance. Brian,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Pam,
I'm going to abstain only because I think I read these. I think these are the ones that I commented on, but I didn't look at them this morning. So if you've got a majority, my integrity tells me.
okay. All right. Well, I did read them. My comments were included. I didn't have any concerns, so I will vote in favor. So with the majority, we'll accept those minutes. Thank you. I'll just acknowledge that we continue to be behind in our minutes. We've got 4 sets of minutes that are outstanding. Karen, I know you're working on them, but we really do owe the public these minutes. So I'm going to encourage all of us to do our part in getting these minutes reviewed, drafted, and distributed. So we'll follow up on that, but hopefully in our next meeting, we'll have more minutes to be reviewed. Okay. With that, in our next meeting, upcoming is April 13th. I just also would just want to comment that we have an awful lot that the board wants to get accomplished in the next several months. In our next meeting scheduled for April 13th, we do want to get back to doing rate deep dive on a particular rate topic, and we will focus on that in April. We will also have a discussion on a draft report from the fiber optics completion task force. I did have an outreach to Mark to get a sense of timing. So our goal in April will be to review that topic as well. But I also think that we have some other agenda items. I'm going to propose that we consider an ad hoc meeting at the end of this month, in part because we obviously have a full agenda today. We have a warrant article on the putting together a solar completion plan, which I'm not sure that we're going to have enough time to talk about today. And so would propose that we have an ad hoc meeting at the end of the month. Dave, I don't know, maybe we could take a poll. This might be a meeting that would be just really for discussion. I don't want to bring new content, but we may have follow-up from today's meeting. But I also want to make sure that we have time to discuss that warrant article, as well as we'll have to vote on the light plant article as well. So hoping that we can have that as an ad hoc meeting. And if there's more discussion from today, we can follow up on that as well. So would the board be open to that? Maybe April 30th that week?
Yeah, it's good for me.
Okay.
I mean, if you have to name a date, but if the date works, it's good. The idea is good.
I just want to confirm, you said April 30th, not March 30th.
Yes, March 30th. I'm sorry. Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it would be good to do an extra meeting because we do have a lot on our plate. You had mentioned the rate philosophy discussions. I would like to request that we talk about the expenses that the light plant pays and what is fixed and what is variable. Kind of go through the expenses and say, all right, what does customer habit affect in those expenses and what categories in that accounting is not affected by customer behavior. I think that will underpin a lot of our rate discussions.
Right. So Brian, if you recall, we had 4 detailed rate topics that we wanted to review. We went through one. The second one is in fact that topic, what I think Laura had coined the residential demand fee that will get into fees and our fixed costs. So that is the targeted topic for April.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're holistically looking at all of the accounting lines. Sorry, I'm stumbling on my words, but you know what I mean? We're looking not just at, oh, is a demand fee good or bad, but we actually look at our underlying expenses and what a rate and it could, indicate to a customer to change their habit and to control that expense, and what what expenses are not affected by that?
So let's not have a detailed discussion now, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
hear your comment around the scope of that discussion. So we'll
Thank you.
have some offline discussion around that, but it is what we had outlined previously to cover. Okay. So with that, I just want to make a comment about our agenda for today. As you can see, we're dedicating a majority of our discussion today to our strategic plan. And that really is needed because we're sort of 4 years into our 8-year plan. The goal is really to reestablish our baseline for the timeframe and the initiatives for our plan. And obviously our plan needs to incorporate new projects that we've got on our plate, including the CMS solar project. But we also recognize that the resiliency goals around battery storage and solar build out need to be part of that strategic plan. And I just want to remind the board also that in our original plan, we had a very deliberate sequencing of initiatives. So our focus today is to get a clear status update on that plan and revisit some of the risks and decisions that we need to make, because some of the initiatives gate other initiatives. So it's important that we be grounded in what those issues are and that we understand what we need to proceed with in what order, so that we can then evaluate for sort of additional items that are on our agenda, like building out of solar. So there's certain things that we have to complete before we can take on all of those things. In addition, Jason's going to join us today to give us an update on the broadband, which I think is also core to our priorities as a board. So we'll hear more about that today. So, all right. So with that, I think we can proceed. Dave, I know you sent out your director's report in writing in advance, so appreciate that. But I'll let you cover your updates with that in mind.
I wanted to thank Dave for doing that. I think that's a great upgrade in our whole management of our understanding of things and will ease things. So thanks, Dave, for doing that. I hope that goes, and it was well put together, I thought. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Great.
All right. So Mass Save is now offering rebates to Concord households and businesses that currently heat with natural gas if they switch to heat pumps. Mass Save provides rebates of $10,000 for air source heat pumps and $15,000 for ground source heat pumps as homeowners' sole source of heating. Rebates of $1,250 per ton of capacity are available for air source heat pumps used for partial home heating if integrated controls are installed. Generous rebates for businesses switching from gas heating to heat pumps are also available. By early April, CMOP expects to be ready to offer similar rebates to Concord households that switch from oil, propane, electric resistance, or ETS heating to heat pumps after January 1 of 2022. So we're making it retroactive to January 1st. Customers who already do some of their heating with heat pumps will be eligible for partial home rebates if they add more. In Q2, we expect to launch rebates matching Mass Save's commercial customers who switch from oil, propane, electric resistant to heat pump. And that's up to $50,000 every 3 years. Last month, the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center launched Mass Fleet Advisor. This free service helps commercial fleets owners navigate the transition to EVs, from identifying zero emissions van and truck models to identify applicable funding opportunities and providing direct planning assistance for our charging equipment. With help from our EV support team, Concord Academy and the Fenn School have already requested services from Mass Fleet Advisor. On the operations side, on February 28th, we modified our office hours. As you might recall, we were open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And we're now 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. On the middle school project that Wendy just mentioned, Amanda and I met with Solar Design Associates, and they are now putting together a proposal for continued services for the solar storage project. In addition, we met with SMMA, Solar Design Associates, and Dr. Lori Hunter to start coordinating efforts. Now, we'll continue to meet as needed, but I will say it was a good first meeting, and it it's going to continue as needed, but we're expecting it probably every other week, or probably not more than that, but we're thinking every other week or once a month. The metering project, the AMS, as previously mentioned, we received 9 RFPs for the metering project. 3 of the proposals did not meet the mandatory requirements. The remaining 6 proposals were reviewed and ranked by Joe Repoff, Laura Scott, Carol Hilton, Jason Bulger, Bob Hill from Water and Sewer, Nelson Mew from Water and Sewer, Brian Folds, Jackie Lemmerhart, who's our consultant, and myself. I'd like to highlight the effort and the amount of work that the review team put into the evaluations. It was simply amazing. We've never done that much review on our RFPs. So appreciate all the work from the team. At this point, we'll be moving on to the next steps in the process, which is evaluating the cost and scheduling interviews with the top 3 evaluated vendors. So that's moving along nicely, and I'll have more to update in the next meeting. And just a reminder, on Thursday, March 17th, we'll be presenting Article 39, light plant expenditures and payment in lieu of taxes to the FinCom at the enterprise hearing. That's my
That's great. Thank you. So Dan, I have a question, because I always get asked this question, and I have it as well. And it's great that we have these new rebate offerings coming online. That's fantastic. On the heat pumps, one of the challenges consumers always have is that, and I'll use just oil as an example. So people tend to keep their oil burners in place because they just don't want to remove it, right? So if somebody was going to install heat pumps, are they only eligible if they actually completely disable the oil or the gas in that scenario? Trevor.
So I'm going to let Jan answer that, since she's the expert in this area.
Yeah.
I can answer that, yes.
Thanks, Jan.
So homeowners who don't want to remove a prior heating system are eligible for that whole home rebate if they sign a verification form indicating that they've either disconnected the system or they commit to not using it except in an emergency, where an emergency is your heat pump is down for maintenance or there's an extreme weather event.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that clarification. I've just never asked in the past, so that's helpful.
Thank you, Jen. That was very helpful.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people want to replace their central air with a heat pump and keep their heating system just in case. And with that confidence, they can move forward.
Right. Yeah, that's helpful. Okay. All right. Any other questions on the update? All right, not seeing any. All right, let's move along on the agenda to our broadband update. And Jason, I know you're joining us today. I assume you're on point for this discussion, unless Dave, you want to do an intro.
All right, thank you. So as you may know, the director of telecom who oversees the Concord broadband division at the light plant left the town of Concord in mid-February. I was asked to provide immediate assistance and be the functional interim manager of that division, while Dave, Carrie LaFleur, interim town manager, and I discussed, what was going to be needed to fill that role. In my capacity as CIO, I've worked very closely with the broadband division. For over a year, I've attended their biweekly status meetings. I've assisted them with procuring hardware and work on special projects with them. I've provided technical assistance and security audits, training, also helped during the various outages and incidents, and also worked very closely with the team on the phone system upgrade, which originally had been in the hands of the telecom director. So in the past 3 weeks, we've made tremendous progress on addressing several of the projects that were ongoing, including procuring hardware like servers and fiber inspecting and cleaning tools and safety equipment. So I just want to highlight a couple of the other things that we've done in the last few weeks. I've conducted process reviews to determine how we can improve efficiency and speed things along. I've also conducted needs assessments and worked with the telecom techs and the network engineers to put together plans in place to address the backlog and also to get the hardware improvements installed. The I've attended 2 of the fiber broadband completion task force meetings to provide input and support for their goals. I've been working on customer relationship management tools, CRM tools, so that we can better communicate with users who've expressed interest in our service. It's rare for a business to have so many customers eager to get their service, but you are unable to provide that service. And we think that, having them sit for weeks or months without any contact or update and information on where their installation is just not a good business practice. So I'm trying to put together some tools that would allow us to better track those installations and keep those customers updated so that they know where they are in the list and when their anticipated installation date is. I've worked with the customer service division at the light plant to take advantage of their recommendations and improve data collection and retool the terms and conditions and the broadband website. Both of those are processes. It's nothing that we've just tweaked something. We're definitely going to make sure that goes before a lot of people before we make any substantial long-term changes. But we started those projects. That group is really eager to assist, and they're often the people that interact with the customers first when they want new service, when they need to leave, or when they're having an issue. So as a result, they have a lot of suggestions and ways that we think could change broadband for the better. So we want to take advantage of feedback that could be useful to us. We're also reviewing and preparing to re-advertise the RFP for the help desk, which is really the first point of contact for customers when they're having an issue. It's really important that we maintain continuity there and that there's no gap in the help desk. I've also reached out to vendors who can assist with tackling the backlog and other splicing and repair projects. There have been some issues in the past where we made emergency repairs to get service going, but because of the winter, we have to wait until the warmer weather until we can fully repair those cables. So we want to make sure that all that's lined up and ready to go. As soon as we get a long stretch of warmer weather, we can schedule it. So after many discussions with Dave and Carrie, we've decided to return to the previous model of IT oversight of broadband, with the light plant offering support and coordination. It's an enterprise whose functional needs overlap very nicely with those of IT in terms of how operations are structured and how we guarantee uptime, how we communicate and react to when there are issues, how we plan and strategize to meet timelines and perform upgrades. I have a great relationship with Dave and the entire light plant crew. They're a very selfless group who collaborate very well. So I think this is going to be a very seamless transition for people. I know that the staff, I've talked to them many times, and they're excited about some of the changes that they see on the horizon. We've also decided to repost that director of telecom position as soon as we can. We're making some minor modifications, not really in the duties so much as just clarification so that we understand how those duties are to be completed and that we make sure we have the accountability and transparency that we're looking for. I can tell you personally, I'm very optimistic about where broadband is in the direction that it's going and the potential that it has. I feel like I've seen this division both from the inside as I've helped them collaborate on certain projects and also from the outside. So I have a unique perspective, and I think I know what types of changes need to be made to realign our priorities so that they match with customer expectations of reliable and secure delivery of service. I'll mention in terms of reliability, I think that that's one of the primary areas we need to focus on, and not just reliability of our networks, but how we communicate that to the public and how much trust we have with them, that they understand that we are doing whatever we can to make sure that we have a continuity of operations. So after last year's outage, we created a very detailed post-outage analysis plan that included recommendations for improvement. And I want you to know that these are not just documents that we make just to say that we've done something. We do refer to these on an ongoing basis, and we make sure that those recommendations that we help put together are enacted upon. And so we've seen tremendous progress on all of the goals that we set there. We are already making plans to deploy the hardware that we discussed and some of the upgrades in equipment. And we also have better monitoring tools, specifically syslogs or the tools that can ingest large amounts of logging data so that we know what's going on before there's an issue. And also network monitoring tools that can allow us to look at lots of different endpoints all at one time. We've also taken steps to remove the reliance on the town's network and data centers for broadband. I think when this initially was set up, the town's data centers seemed to provide the most reliable location for putting these servers because those data centers were, backed up and they had power backups and things. And so it seemed like a good location to put those devices. But what we've seen is that when the town needs to do maintenance or when the town experiences issues with its infrastructure, the town has to make sometimes difficult decisions between ensuring continuity for those assets that manage broadband and then those that serve town or public safety. And those are decisions that we don't really want to have to make. And we don't want to see the customers impacted when the town needs to do routine maintenance. So we've taken steps to acquire devices that we can co-locate at the substation, ensure that they're properly backed up and have adequate backup power supplies. And we think this is going to be a more resilient model for the customers. We've also strengthened communication protocols between broadband team, the Light Plant's customer service division, and our help desk support company to make sure that everybody has the latest information and any work that's scheduled is communicated ahead of time. I think in the distant past, we had a very high bar for when we notified people about maintenance, especially when we didn't think that it was going to impact operations, but we've seen too many times where it ultimately did impact operations. And we've now lowered our bar so that anytime we are going to do any changes that could possibly impact operations, we're going to communicate those and plan them well ahead of time. We've also hired a fourth telecom tech, which is somebody who actually installs and maintains the physical fiber. And we've also added a second network engineer to have better coverage during incidents. We've conducted extensive training on our software systems for all of our staff. We've also increased the adoption of collaboration and communication tools among team members, which will help us share information and collaborate in real time when we need to track things. In the outage last year, I can tell you it was very difficult to sort of spin these solutions up on the fly. So we have these in place now so that if we ever do need to share information rapidly, we have a platform to do it. And even though it wasn't that big outage last year, there was an outage on Christmas Eve due to some rodents chewing through fibers. And our team did a fantastic job at repairing the splice and getting service back up, but the rodents unfortunately chewed through the cable less than 24 hours later. So I think that we're looking at different wraps and solutions and different types of cable to be more chew resistant. I think that there's a certain level of patience that the customers have when there's an act of nature or weather that takes down service. But when it happens repeatedly and there are steps that we could have done to mitigate those things, I think that then it really is our responsibility to make sure that we take action and not just say, well, it was the weather or the squirrel. We couldn't really do anything about that, because I think in some cases there is something to be done. And then just to wrap up the discussion on resilience and guaranteeing uptime for customers, at my prompting, the town has recently formed a risk committee whose job it is to systematically document risks in town and then analyze them and make recommendations for controls or mitigations, along with ways to prioritize those. So we're going to apply that same strategy to broadband, and we're not going to sit back and wait for issues to happen. There's always something that we can improve upon, and we're going to keep the light board, the select board, and the public in the loop about how we're addressing those risks, and to the extent that it makes sense and doesn't endanger operations. So from a philosophy perspective, I think when broadband was created, there was a proposal from the organization that was very popular with the citizens of the town. And years have gone by, and I think it's really important to let the Concord community weigh in on the direction of broadband. The mandate that was given to Concord Broadband needs to evolve as technology evolves, as the needs of the community evolves, as the direction of the market evolves. We need to make decisions about what our mandate is. And it can't be something that a couple people in a room decide because it sounds good. We need to bring these decisions to committees and boards and to the public and town meeting. And we have a lot of ideas on how to do that and make sure that we stay in tune with what the customers and the public wants. So I think that meetings like this, meetings with the select board, listening sessions, surveys, town meeting, we need to work on improving the communication to all those venues. I'm committed to providing more in-depth monthly reports to the light board and then routine updates to the select board and the town manager's report, and then much more outreach to the residents and customers, including opt-in notifications and mailing services. I wanted to take a minute just to discuss the data too that's been presented at different light board meetings. I'm not going to give specific numbers today on things like the backlog or installs, because as I've been looking into this, I found a lot of different systems that don't really talk to one another as well as they could. So I think part of being open and transparent is having reliable and repeatable process for getting data. If what you give people doesn't really mean anything, then it's not really being open and transparent with them. So I've seen two people try to pull the same numbers from different systems and get very different results. So we're in the process of auditing all of our data now to make sure that all of the systems match. And we're going to be looking to integrate and automate systems as much as we can so that there's a single system of record for everything. And then it trickles out to other systems from that. But, I think that an example of this is just improving analysis overall. I think that there's been a lot of questions fairly asked of broadband, and we don't always seem to have those numbers or data at our disposal. So I think that in order to be positioned to make well-informed business decisions, we really need to make sure that we have that data. And it might be the will of the people that we're not necessarily going to make what are considered sound business decisions because we want to prioritize this as a service or utility as opposed to an enterprise or a business that is to generate money. But in order to make those decisions, we still need that data. We need to understand what the impact on operations or revenue is going to be. At the select board meeting on Monday, I gave a very similar presentation, and the question was asked of me, what do we think about speeds? Are we thinking about changing speeds? This is a primary example. My gut says absolutely we need to make sure that we stay on top of where the market is and that we gradually increase our speeds as the demands and expectation is that people have faster speeds and higher bandwidth. But you can't just make decisions like that without the actual data to understand what it's going to do to revenue, to customer retention and customer growth. We need to have that data. And then just another incredibly important area, marketing and outreach. It needs to be a cornerstone of the operations to ensure that we are financially stable and can sustain the growth that's expected to expand service to more residences and businesses. And then, again, we just need to put this question out to the town. What do they want broadband to be? Does it need to be more like an enterprise that brings in a little bit of money every year, or is it an essential service that should be expanded to every parcel or a person in town? I can tell you we have a fantastic and dedicated group of people that work on this team. They work nights and weekends. They sleep on the floor during storms so that they can respond more quickly to outages. And I'm really proud to be able to work alongside them and just be a part of that team. So if there's anything that anybody in this meeting, whether from the public or on the board, needs or would like information about, you're always welcome to reach out to me. And I look forward to being a regular fixture at these meetings.
So Jason, thank you. You have been incredibly busy over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and completely really appreciate your transparency and welcome the direction that you're providing to the team, and particularly the transparency, the being proactive in communication with the community, et cetera. I'm glad that you've got staff now. I know that you have your open position. And I recognize that also as a board, we're here to help you in your moving this forward the way it needs to be. I am concerned about that position and the ability to recruit it. So we'll look forward to hearing more from you, and if the board can help you in that vein. It's a very important role, and we want to make sure that you get the resources and the funding you need to get the right skill set in place. So you have a full-time job as it is, never mind broadband. So we want to help you in that vein if there's something you need. So definitely appreciate that. And you've touched on just about every single sort of sore spot that's occurred in the last year or two. So you seem to have almost everything covered, at least in terms of knowing that it needs attention, not that you have a solution.
Right.
And really appreciate that you're taking the time to look at the data and understand what's really going on and being upfront about that and not making commitments. So definitely appreciate that approach. So thank you very much. And so in terms of moving forward, it sounds like broadband as an enterprise function is now fully under your purview. Although the funding remains, although I guess the budget, the enterprise is still under the light board enterprise, correct? The way it used to be. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Just want to be clear on that. So, all right. Well, let me open up the floor to the board because I think there'll be lots of questions. So, Gordon.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jason, very much. And, you know, as I've watched some of the struggles that have occurred in keeping the broadband service running, it kind of reminds me of what they say about wartime. You know, it's like, you know, hours and days and months of boredom, and then, you know, moments of sheer terror. And, you know, I really feel for you guys, you know, that Christmas Eve thing. I'm sure that nobody wanted to be out there dealing with an outage. And so what I really like hearing from what you're talking about here, and this really applies to the electric service too, Dave, it's that, you know, whenever you encounter a challenge, an outage, some kind of crisis, it's really helpful to have this training, have the systems, the people, the training, the equipment, the monitoring, everything in place so that you're not doing it the first time, and that there are people in your organization that have seen this before, and so there's less terror. And you know, the thing is that connects to a bigger thing, which is that we're also trying to fill these positions. We're trying to find good people, and anything that we can do to support you in lowering the terror level, making it easier, because really we want Concord to be a great place to work and for people to thrive. So, you know, I totally support what you're doing, and anything the light board can do to make that happen, I support too.
Yeah, thank you. And that is something that I see consistently in Concord, that the boards and committees and people really want to see us succeed. And I try to take that message back to the team as often as I can to say, you know, we do have a lot of work and we have a lot of challenges, and we need to really, you know, make some deep changes in how we operate. But we have nearly everybody on our side. You know, everybody is rooting for us, and that makes it so much easier, as opposed to feeling like you're having to swim against the current and really upend something. So that is much appreciated. Thank you, Gordon.
Sorry, I was muted. Any other questions from the board? No? Okay. All right. Well, Jason, thank you so much. I think, I know you have your hands full, and we will look forward to additional updates. Sorry, Pam?
I just want to say this was exactly what we need. I don't have any substantive comment, but I just wanted to thank you. That is a model of what we need to receive, the kind of detail and forward thinking and anticipating issues, all of it, a sophisticated view of how we deal with data. All of it is just, really appreciated. And I like this as a model. So thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, with that, thank you again. We'll now move on in our agenda to our main agenda, to our topic of the long-term strategic plan. Dave, I know this was a tall task that I asked you and the team to put together, but I think critically important for the board to be grounded in the status of our current strategic plan and recognize that we have new things to add to that plan. So I don't know where you want to start, Dave. You want to kick it off and
yeah,
other members of the team?
So you're right. It was a big lift in a short period of time, but we'll go through a presentation here in a couple minutes. What I'd ask is that you hold questions until we're done so that we can get through the presentation. There's a lot of material. My team's, you know, it's going to be interactive with many people on the team speaking to slides. So if we can hold questions till the end, great. We can go back to the slide, and that's what we're looking to do. But we're thinking we'll get about 30 to 40 minutes of presentation, and then there'll be plenty of time to discuss what we present, if that's all right.
Yeah, Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, can you guys see that all right?
Yep.
Oops, hold on. Get a little bit happy with the mouse there. All right, so we're going to go through the strategic plan that we put together a number of years ago. I think it was a good suggestion from Wendy to kind of take a look at this. It really gives us a gauge on where we are. And as Wendy said, you know, there may be things we want to add as well. So we're going to give it a start. You guys probably recognize this slide. This is, it's on the strategic plan. It kind of shows you the 10 initiatives, put some calendar timelines within dependencies. And we're going to go through each one of these items as we move forward and show you where we are on them and the progress we've made or haven't made. And I'm going to have Matt speak to this one.
Good morning. So I'm sure you all remember back in 2018, 2019, we talked about this quite a bit. We went live with NISC, the major modules. We went live in 2019. The system allowed us to streamline a number of our processes. We were able to move a number of paper-based processes into the system. For example, we used to fill out paper timesheets. Those would be assembled and then data entered into a spreadsheet and then transferred into the accounting system. Now all of this stuff flows through electronically. So that's really cut down on a number of time wasting processes. From an external point of view, customers now have more access to data through the customer portal. We have a number of many more payment channels, whether it be credit card or bill paying through your bank website. So there's a lot more access to data. Customers can also report outages through that customer portal. Lastly, the information is now available to all users from almost anywhere. And when I say that, a customer can be on the beach somewhere and check his latest bill or usage on his house. Also from internally, Dave could review my timesheet from the beach or wherever he's on vacation. And then I also wanted to add that once we are able to get AMS meters installed, we'll have a lot more capability with the system, a lot more data that we can pull from and more accurate accounting. So that's all I have.
And just one little note on this. Now we have over 5,000 customers on Smart Hub, which is way higher than we anticipated. It's great. So, all right, on the advanced metering system, on the first slide, you probably recall that our original target was 2018 to 2019. Obviously, the project got pushed out a number of years. So we had some delays, but in the process, we had stakeholder meetings, went through a number of different pieces of it. The website is fully up to date with extensive materials. So anyone that was interested in the project can go on there and see where we are and what we have. As I mentioned in my director's update, the team, did an extensive review of the RFPs that we received. There's almost 2,500 pages of materials that they went through from the 6 vendors that met the requirements. We're now in the process of actually this week of going through the cost proposals, and we'll be scheduling interviews with the top 3 vendors. So we're progressing along nicely in this, but as I mentioned, it is later than we anticipated in the original plan. Laura, do you want to speak to this one?
Yes, thanks, Dave. And just to reiterate that the first two topical areas that were discussed were both found what I would consider foundational to further goals that we had in the future. In other words, we needed the comprehensive billing and accounting system to be able to offer the customer service and reliability that we have planned. In addition, the AMS system is needed to do things like time of use rates, which we're going to discuss later. So both of those two things really had to happen before we can do many of the other things we're going to talk about. Non-emitting power purchase agreements and renewable energy certificates, however, did not have dependencies, and we have been working on those diligently since before the strategic plan, and certainly since. I'll go through some of those, the projects that we've entered into. But basically, the purpose of this goal was to provide customers with a non-emitting power supply. And specifically, the 2017 strategic plan had as goals that we would have 100% non-carbon emitting power by 2021. And that 25% of all the power purchased would come directly from non-emitting power that came with certificates that we could retire. Now, the 2021 original timeframe was a result of a projection that was made back in 2016, 2017 timeframe, where we anticipated the cost of RECs being at one level, setting rates to collect those costs. And by the time we hit 2021, we anticipated we would have enough money collected to fully offset all our power supply. Where are we now? We didn't quite make the 2021 timeframe. The price of RECs increased dramatically, but we got pretty close. In 2021, we anticipate that 84% of all of the power that we sold will have RECs associated with it that we will have retired. The reason that that's a forecast at the moment and not an actual is because we don't complete the purchase of renewable energy certificates for a particular year until June 15th of the following year. So we'll make our final transactions with respect to 2021 renewable energy certificates on June 15th, 2022. But based on the current forward projection of prices and what we did collect in rates, 84% is our forecast. And for 2022, through the addition of more power purchase directly from renewable energy or non-carbon emitting sources, and our forecast of the cost of RECs, we anticipate that 98% of all of our power sold in 2022 will have RECs retired with it. So we almost made that goal, but not quite. But with regard to the PPAs with RECs retired, we surpassed the 25% goal with 33% in 2021 and 47% we anticipate for 2022. So in summary, higher REC prices delayed the achievement of the 100% goal. However, the PPA purchases with RECs are much ahead of schedule. Oh, and next slide. So this is just a listing of all the resources that we've entered into since 2017 that come from non-carbon emitting sources. You can see there's a variety of wind, nuclear, hydro, and solar projects with pretty significant commitments. The right column, it shows the percent of needs that we think that these resources will cover. Obviously, they're not precise, they're variable, except for the nuclear, the other resources are variable in nature. And so we'll get what we get, but these are estimates. And they're not even the column saying year purchase is the year we entered into the commitment. That doesn't mean the power starts flowing immediately. So some of those notes below just mention when the resources would begin to provide power to the town. Thanks. Okay, the goal with regard to rate design had two components. One was about time of use rates, and the purpose was to send a price signal to customers to shift their consumption to off-peak periods. They listed as input assumptions in the strategic plan that a desired on to off-peak ratio would be 2.5 to 1, and that the on-peak period would be 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. The status on this goal is that we did propose a residential time of use rate in December 2020. It had a 2.5 to 1 peak to off-peak ratio, and we had further refined the on-peak period and reduced it from 5 to 4 hours. We need the AMS system to enable default time of use opt-out rates for all residential customers. And we do anticipate, once we get some technology issues resolved, that we will come out with a pilot TOU project in 2022 that customers can voluntarily sign up for. Next slide. The other component of the rate design mentioned in the strategic plan was a desire to move more of the cost recovery to fixed charges. The input assumptions were that the residential customer charge would rise to $30 a month by 2021, and the G2 and G3 charges would rise to $100 and $600 per month, respectively, by 2021. In reality, the charts below show what we have accomplished. We have been moving more costs to the fixed recovery category. We moved from $6.80 per month customer charge for residential customers in January 2015 to $16.80 in January of 2022. So maybe about halfway to the goal. And the G3 commercial customers moved from a $321 per month customer charge to $416. So we have not achieved the levels identified in the strategic plan. Much debate has been had at the board level over the appropriate level, and I think more debate is to come.
Jan's going to
Jan?
speak to the slide.
So our fuel switching initiative involves promoting heat pumps and heat pump water heaters for space heating and water heating respectively to displace fossil fuel use for those purposes. And we promote these technologies with rebates and with technical assistance. The target in the strategic plan was 770 new heat pumps installed by 2025, with an interim goal of 203 new installations by the end of 2021. So we have exceeded that interim goal with 223 air and ground source heat pumps installed between 2018 and the end of 2021, and rebates for 28 heat pump water heaters also paid out during that same period. As we've collaborated with various partners since the strategic plan was completed in 2017, our thinking has evolved about what it will take to meet the town's 2050 80% carbon reduction goal. And it's likely that the original target of 770 new installations by 2025 is too low. So we estimate that CMLP needs to facilitate the adoption of heat pumps as the primary heat source for at least 1,000 households by 2025. And to that end, in 2021, we really boosted our technical assistance capability by launching the Concord Clean Comfort program. Our trained heating cooling coaches help our customers navigate the process of adopting heat pumps. The service is supported by CMLP and grant funds, and it's offered at no cost to our customers. We have received over 300 requests for coaching services since the service was launched in February of 2021, just over a year ago. And about 80% of customers requesting coaching services follow up and engage with a coach. Our 3 coaches are all Concord residents. They are committed to the community as well as to our fuel switching goals. CMLP also contracts with Abode Energy Management to provide some additional services. Abode is a Concord-based company, and their staff provides backup technical expertise to our coaches when additional input is helpful in particular situations. Abode also maintains an air source heat pump participating contractor list with contractors that are familiar with our rebate programs and have a track record of success and customer satisfaction. Customers are not required to use the contractors on this list, but it is helpful to a lot of our customers to have a starting place for identifying potential installers. In order to ensure optimal heat pump performance and home comfort and the realization of projected cost savings. Abode also does pre-installation sizing and design reviews and post-installation quality assurance checks for every heat pump project for which a CMLP rebate is desired. And we feel that all of these services together are a bulwark against bad installs for our customers. We are doing everything we can to ensure that our customers have positive stories to tell about their experience of adopting heat pumps. And as Dave mentioned during his director's report, fortunately, Concord is not alone in understanding the urgency of the urgent need for fuel switching. And as Dave described, Mass Save is now offering heat pump rebates for natural gas heating households in Concord. That allows us to use our funds to offer similar rebates for households that heat with oil, electric, and propane heating that switch to heat pumps. And there are generous rebates for gas heating businesses from Mass Save, which we also plan to match for oil, electric, and propane heating businesses with a cap of $50,000 every 3 years.
Laura, do you want to take this one? You're muted.
Sorry. In the strategic plan, we had as one of our goals to increase the adoption of electric vehicles. Specifically, the strategic plan called for the addition of 40 new EVs per year above and beyond business as usual. These types of goals are very difficult to measure because nobody really has any idea what business as usual would have looked like. So what I've reported here are simply just factual numbers of how many EVs were registered in town. This data comes from the assessor's database of VIN numbers. So between 2014 and 2015, there was an increase of 23 electric vehicles. In 2016, 38, 2017, 42, 2018, 41. The blue in those bars shows the number of total vehicles that were enrolled in one of CMLP's many electric vehicle programs designed to facilitate the adoption of electric vehicles while at the same time encouraging people to charge off peak, because the addition of electric vehicles is not necessarily a good idea regardless of the situation. It's only good for the planet, for the town, and for the light plant if people charge their electric vehicles off peak. So the blue shows how many of the total cars were actually participating in the EV Miles program, which provides incentives to charge off peak. So beginning in 2019, we started to see an accelerated increase in the number of electric vehicles registered in town. In 2019, there was 103. In 2020, 95, and that was partly due to the pandemic. And then in 2021, 189. And you can see a commensurate increase in the people participating in the EV Miles program. It's convenient that the difference starting when our programs really got into play in 2018 and 2019 does look like about 60 or so a year. So maybe we hit the target, maybe these increases would have happened anyway. It's very difficult to say. But in addition to EV Miles, we have other programs such as the public charging stations that you see around town, a program to help subsidize the cost of installing level 2 charging, rebates against the purchase of electric vehicles. We've done a number of programs to help multi-dwelling units get EV charging. And we've also proposed a new rate that businesses could take advantage of if they wanted to put EV charging in at their commercial spaces. We also have a significant support service that Jan's going to talk about. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. In the interest of time, we eliminated that slide because we were afraid we would take up too much of the time doing the presentation and not leaving you with enough time to discuss it all. So sorry about that. Dave?
Yeah, so utility scale storage, is obviously on the list. It's a pretty important piece for us. We had looked at, in the strategic plan of having 5 megawatts, which discharges 15 megawatt hours over 3 hours. The assumptions were that it would cost around $4.5 million in 2017, and that the cost would decrease about 7% a year. So obviously, that's that information may not be as accurate as we thought at the time. But where we are right now is we have 3 potential projects that we're working on for battery storage. One would be at 300 Baker Avenue, and another one on WR Grace, which we're set to get a proposal from a vendor on, and obviously the middle school project, which we've talked a little bit about over the last couple meetings. We're looking at a 5 megawatt battery, 15 megawatt hours, and we're looking at cost, and that would be, each site would be different, right? So 5 megawatt would probably be the WR Grace site, and the other 2 probably wouldn't be as big. But if you look at the price, it's 5.5 base and 6.7 all in. So costs haven't decreased as we forecasted in the plan originally. But the plan for utility scale storage is really, when we set out to do this, it was to shave the monthly peaks, the transmission and capacity peaks. But as things evolve, it's much more than that now, right? The utility scale storage is to address solar saturation as well, which is a major issue for us. We still can, shave the demands, and that would be the plan. And those savings could help fund the project or the projects. So that's where we are with that. We also had smart thermostats as one of the 10 items that we were looking at. We haven't done anything with this yet. So this is one area that we haven't moved forward with. And primarily, if you looked at the dependencies, we were looking at this as a dependency at the time on smart meters. And as we all know, we're in that process right now. That's not to say you couldn't do smart thermostats without smart meters, because there are different things out there. But, we didn't want to go forward with something until we looked at smart meter technology and what they offered for programs with this. So there'll be more to come on this as we move through the MS project. Jan?
So our energy efficiency initiative supports efficient products and upgrades in the residential, commercial, and low-income customer sectors. And between 2018 and 2021, CMLP rebates and services have resulted in 1,600 megawatt hours of annual savings and 306 kilowatts of demand reduction from 42 commercial high-efficiency lighting projects. CMLP has supported 465 home energy assessments, 72 home weatherization projects with rebates, and over 12,000 LED bulbs installed. The 1,600 megawatt hours of reduced consumption is about 1% of sales, meaning that we've made progress towards that goal of savings of 1.5% of sales by 2025. And the description of this initiative that you see on this slide is very comprehensive. And we are planning to implement some additional initiatives in 2022 to bring us closer to that vision. So starting in 2022, CMLP will pay 100% of commercial energy audit costs for small businesses, up from 50% in the past. To help our customers implement weatherization projects, we will be launching a participating weatherization contractor list in 2022. We'll be offering quality assurance reviews for weatherization projects, and we'll be offering higher weatherization rebates for lower income households. We will also begin offering intensive assessments for interested customers that will result in multi-year prioritized plans for full home decarbonization. So these assessments will provide more comprehensive weatherization recommendations than a basic home energy assessment does, and we'll look at ventilation needs as well. The assessments will identify fuel switching opportunities for space heating, water heating, cooking, clothes drying, and driving. The assessment will look at opportunities for solar PV and for battery storage as well. And the reports will provide people with information on the tools that are available to them as they tackle different parts of their multi-year decarbonization plan. So for example, that the heating, cooling, coaching service is available when they're ready to tackle heat pumps, that the EV support service is available when they're ready to transition to EVs. We also plan to follow up with assessment, decarbonization assessment customers over a period of years to assist them if need be as they implement these measures. And finally, as we've already discussed, 2022 is the year when we're going to be implementing these enhanced air source and ground source heat pump rebates for non-gas homes and businesses.
Laura, you
And
want to speak to this
finally,
one?
yeah, finally, we get to distributed solar, which the original strategic plan had not included. And based on customer input and feedback, we recognized that that needed to be included. And so that was added to the strategic plan. So what we see here is the amount of solar capacity that has been added since the study period ended for the strategic plan, which was 2016. We have added 2 megawatts of residential and commercial distributed solar. The total right now at the end of 2021 is 4.3, excuse me, that's the end of February 2022 is 4.3 megawatts. In-town purchases, since 2016, we added WR Grace and the rooftop system over on Virginia Road, which was 5.8 megawatts total. When added to Walden Pond, that cumulative total is 7.6 megawatts. And during that time, we've entered into contracts for 8.2 megawatts of grid scale power purchases. These are purchases made from regional projects, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, various locations, and imported to CMLP. That all has happened since 2016, so the cumulative total is the same as the additions. If you add all those up, that's 16 megawatts of additions since 2016. If you don't include the in-town purchases that were made in 2017, of 6 megawatts, that's roughly 10. However, we are currently in negotiations for an additional up to 5.6 megawatts that would be added of grid scale power purchases. So you can see here the focus has been, or not the focus, but more of the megawatts are coming from grid scale power purchases. And why is that? I've done some quick calculations of the cost of residential solar. This is over a 20-year NPV, and including the benefits of reduced transmission and capacity costs, residential solar ends up costing just under 10 cents a kilowatt hour over this 20-year time horizon. At the same time, grid scale power is currently running between 5 and 6 cents. So the cost of residential is nearly twice the cost of grid scale. And so as the light plant considers the appropriate investments in solar, we need to take into account the economics and the opportunities that go along with the different strategies for optimizing the total amount of solar on the system. The other thing I'll mention, because I know Article 38 is currently a topic, the 25 megawatts that they were looking to add, if you look at this cumulative total here, plus the additional negotiations, that is about 25 megawatts. At the same time, the load in Concord has dropped from 2010 to 2021. The minimum load in May has dropped from 13 megawatts to 6.6. Okay, the difference there is 6.4 megawatts, which if you run a 25 megawatt solar project at its maximum monthly capacity of 25% is about 6 megawatts. So the 25 megawatts that people wanted to add in 2010 of solar has disappeared. That load is gone. And that has to be factored into our solar strategy of how much solar is appropriate and how much solar can we handle. If we buy it on the grid, we can use the grid to balance the saturation. If we get too much power between noon and 2, we can sell it to others on the grid and replenish it at hours that we need. If we put it in town, we don't have that ability. We can't export it out to the grid when we have too much. We'll have to manage it all internally with an expensive battery. So much of these technical issues need to factor into how do we best want to achieve our non-carbon emitting goals. Thank you. This is a slide just comparing the amount of solar that was added during the MLP solar program. These are numbers that come from E&E, who's the administrator of the program. And you can see that Concord added far more kilowatts of capacity to their respective system than these other municipals, even though some of these others are much larger than CMLP. Next slide. And this is a chart of the distributed solar PV additions in kilowatts DC. You can see, there was a big jump between 2012 and 2017. That's the steepest part of the curve. But I believe it's been said that no additions were made after 2017, which simply is not true. We've added about 1.5 megawatts between 2017 and 2020. Slow measured progress and different incentives that we implemented along with the state over that time period has resulted in additional distributed solar additions to the system. And that is the end of our formal presentation.
So we'll open it up to questions from the board.
Dave, I think I'm struggling with a little bit, what's the right order here rather than just randomly jumping through? Can we sort of selectively walk through by initiative and have the board sort of ask questions? But at least that would be my approach. Respecting that we don't have the slides, so we will likely need you to open up that presentation and we'll direct you to slides. I think as appropriate, that's going to have to make sense. So
yeah, however you want to do it, we can
okay.
manage.
Okay.
Is it possible for you to email the presentation to us so that we have the slides?
I can do that.
Thank you.
Brian, I assume you wanted that right now. Is that what you were asking for?
Preferably, yeah. That way I could look at slides and prepare my questions and save time.
Okay. So I just want to comment. Can we start with going to the AMI slide? So I think, and it's been great, by the way. Let me just comment. Really appreciate all of the team's effort to sort of pull these slides together and sort of level set us on what our original goal was, what our current status is. And I'm hoping that our discussions now going forward are an opportunity for the board to go back and ask questions about status and then also ask questions about risks, because throughout your presentation, there were some issues identified. And my personal bias is to drill into where you need input from the board and where the board wants to see progress, if you will, in some situations. In terms of the AMI, I know that we're knee deep in an evaluation of that. I just want to level set in terms of expectations for timelines. So we're knee deep in the RFP. The slides make a reference to we'll select the vendor in 2022, and then we'll order materials in 2022. So my question here is, as we think of 2023 and then funding, I know we had money that was funded from many town meetings ago. I think we had roughly $3 million set aside for materials. Do we expect that we're going to need more funding for the rollout of the AMIs in 2023 to complete it?
So you're correct. $3 million was authorized at a town meeting a number of years ago for the purchase of advanced metering system. We need to discuss that on the board level. I believe we're going to want to do a borrowing for that. But I think it would be a healthy discussion to have to see if, we had reserves and we would want to use reserves maybe. We haven't had that discussion yet, but we also haven't looked at the pricing yet that came in with the vendors. So that's this week. So we'll have a better idea of where we are in terms of that $3 million. But so we're not quite there yet, Wendy. But that is something that we'll certainly have more information after the end of this week.
Thank you. I know we didn't have an answer to that, but I want to remind the board that this is a topic that we need to address because our whole strategy is dependent on implementing these AMIs. So we need to make sure that that's a priority for us as we think forward in our planning. So that's why I raised that. And then to other members of the board have questions on AMI? Brian?
I've seen the proposals. I've been deeply involved in the advanced metering infrastructure. It is underpinning a lot of barriers to advancement on other goals. A lot of what we need is data to accomplish these things. And in 2017, the town meeting approved, I think it was 3.5 million for borrowing on this project. And it needs to get out there so that we can have the data so we can move forward on, solar storage, heat pumps. Without good information, we can't make good progress. So it's vitally important. It's happening now. And we have to, just prudently push it forward as quickly as we can without making major mistakes. The meetings that are coming up where the three vendors will come in and make presentations, I'm hoping that we can drill down into more detail and decide upon one of these three as which direction we want to go forward, because it is going to be, as Dave put it in one of the meetings, it's a marriage. This technology is going to be how daily operations happen at the light plant, that and the NSIC system. So it's very important, and we got to get it right, and we got to get it done so that we can move on to these other topics that customers see and are demanding.
Thanks, Brian. I think this is the one area where the board has been very focused on moving this forward. So I'm confident we'll go forward. I think in terms of our timeline, funding is going to be important. But is it fair to say, Dave, also that our goal would be to complete the rollout in 2023 by year end?
Well, I don't want to, waver on this, and I don't want to commit to anything simply because we don't know what the lead times are necessarily going to be. That would be our goal, would to be, to get a contract in place and get the materials ordered. And then obviously lead times are a little bit scary right now, not just with meters, just in general. We're seeing lead times for like fiber optic cable, 52 weeks. So, and it's all over the place. So that would be the goal, Wendy. I can't commit to that until we select the vendor and know what their lead times are, but we definitely want to start the rollout in 23. Goal would be to be completed, but I don't know if that's realistic at this point.
Thanks. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but that's exactly what we need to talk about, because this board needs to understand that we have a strategy and we're not fully in control of the pieces, right? And there's money and there's things that we need to do to understand and mitigate and start thinking about some risk mitigation, because it's possible we can't roll this thing out, right? For reasons that are out of our control. So that's our job, to understand, integrate this thinking and make sure that we're thinking about all of that as we provide guidance to you. So I know we're still proceeding as planned. I just want also the citizenry and others to know that, so we have a target, but it's at risk because there's things that we're not in control of. And that's really sort of the transparency of this discussion.
Yeah, and that risk is across the board on all our materials. We're actually running reports right now on every item we have, and then looking at, you know, if we want to add more because we need it for future projects, when's it going to come in? How's it tie in with projects? And it's exactly the same thing here with this project.
Appreciate that, Dave. So I'd like to move on to the rate design set of slides, and I just wanted to ask a question. You know, we're going to be talking next month a little bit around our rates and the fixed rate. So I know we're sort of moving forward on some of this. We referred to a pilot in 2022, I believe, right?
Yep.
Okay, so at some point, we'll want to hear more about that pilot. And is the assumption here that we're going to use the existing AMI meters that we might have in stock to the degree that members are citizens want to pursue this strategy, or how will we go about doing that pilot or identifying customers to participate?
Yeah, so we're in the early pieces of that pilot. We do have a meter installed at the light plant that we're you know, working on and testing in the system. Once we're comfortable with the results there, then we would start looking at rolling out the pilot. But we don't want to roll it out until we know we have everything set up properly.
So we'll have this on our agenda just for status update sometime this year for more public.
For sure.
And Dave, that will use the existing NextGrid system for that pilot, or are we going to do a pilot of whatever system is picked for AMS?
It would use NextGrid right now. The way NISC works is once we select our vendor, then you get put into the queue on their end for a project. It's a project for them, and then they work within the system with whatever vendor we select to get that set up. So the pilot would be with existing smart meters.
Okay, any other questions on this topic from the board? I can't see Pam, but or Gordon to be. Oh, I can see Gordon, but not Pam.
So I wanted to ask about the slide that's up and higher fixed fees. Last November, when we discussed rates, we referred back to the Baker-Tilly cost of service study and did a small increase in the fixed fee collection rather than what we were doing, which was, you know, a multi-dollar increase. What are we? I would like to stick with getting to this $30 target, but are we? How does Baker-Tilly factor into this? Because this was done in 2017, and Baker-Tilly has changed that, and obviously followed Baker-Tilly and not this last November. So, what direction are we going with this? I mean, I think the board wants to see higher fixed charges for fixed expenses. But that's Baker-Tilly has muddied that water. So what is your understanding of direction from the board on this, Dave?
So, you know, it's a board question, really, Brian. I mean, we you know, we put the stuff out there. We anticipate the fixed charges going up like they have. Obviously, they've kind of gone stagnant a little bit, but it was a challenge going from the 12 to 16. If you recall in the board meetings, it wasn't something that just automatically, yeah, let's do this. So I think it's going to be a discussion amongst the board on where they want to get or where you guys want to get with this. But we are, you know, certainly open to the idea of increasing the fixed charges based on the philosophy. So that hasn't changed on our side.
I think I would just add, Brian, that, you know, Baker-Tilly is on this very slow, measured increase pending input from the board. So it's not that we're muddying the waters. It's just sort of stagnantly going up gradually was the plan until you guys decide to do something different.
Okay.
Average annual, we've been planning about a 5% increase in the last couple of years. Based on the direction. I mean, 5% was what we did last year, but it was sort of a deliberate strategy to do a slow and steady increase until we had more information on our overall rate strategy, right?
So
I think this is our topic for next month, right?
I know, I know.
Yeah,
Can I just go ahead, Gordon? I've asked.
I just about the discussion, if we've got, I don't know, about a dozen or so topics that we've just reviewed, I don't know if we can dive deep into any one of them. Because I have thoughts about all of this, but I don't really want to take the conversation off, off track. So it's just a matter of how much discussion this particular chart needs right at this moment.
So my goal of this walkthrough is for the board to ask questions and to identify issues that we as a board need to review further. We can do that at a different time, but also I want to make sure the board is aware of all the risks, right? Because our job is risk mitigation also. So as we go through this, we need to identify where we have risk in achieving the strategy and where we as a board need to help provide more direction to mitigate those risks, or just acknowledge we can't do this all because the risks are too high. So but that's really my goal for this, is just to walk through those issues, and to the degree the board wants further discussion, we'll make sure that there's a plan to do that over the next couple months.
Well, speaking of risks, then on this particular chart, we don't really depend on the AMI implementation to change the rate structure for raising the meter rate, right? It's not actually dependency.
True, but it's a, I think it's a net. This isn't a raising the fixed charge is an offset to lowering the variable fees, right? So it's all tied together. But directionally, we want to know where we're going with decisions, so that when we do start those more detailed rate decisions, that we're balancing both of them, right?
Right, and to your point, Wendy, about risk and this particular slide, by having a higher fixed charge and a lower variable, we're reducing risk dramatically to weather and other events that affect sales volume. So that's the overarching plan for this, was to securely collect for the cost of operating the light plant and not be as susceptible to under collection in mild years and over collection in extreme weather years.
Which is why we wanted to address that fixed charge. So I think we're just reaffirming the need to move in that direction.
Could I ask a question about time of use on the slide before? So where did the 2.5 to 1 ratio come from?
So that was the result of the consultant's work that we engaged back when the strategic plan was prepared. However, since that time, I've done research on studies, scientific studies that have been done about price responsiveness, and when we proposed our own time of use to you in 2020, it wasn't just based on the consultant's recommendation. We had since done analysis that suggested if we didn't create a disparity, a discrepancy, a price premium of at least 2.5, we weren't going to get the behavioral modification that we were looking for. So that's really the source of that.
I know that Groton did their 4 and 40 time of use, which is a 1 to 10 ratio, and they had seen some customer engagement in load shifting, but they also received some complaints from high electric users that had done fuel switching and other things. They weren't able to fully avoid that 40 cents and were upset by that. So I hope that we're not fixed on ratios, but more justifying the cost based on expenses. Being able to say, well, it costs this much at this group of hours to supply that energy to you. that cost causation that I'm becoming known for. So, okay, thank you. I wanted to know where that ratio came from, and you answered it.
And we will have certainly probably more than one discussion on time of use rates in the future for sure. Okay. So I just also, it's moving along here. Let me just also comment that I'm going to try to allow this conversation to continue till about 9:15, and then we'll sort of stop. To the degree we have an ad hoc meeting coming up, we'll use some of that time as well to answer additional questions as we see fit at that time. So just a comment. As we go forward on the fuel switching, I just want to reiterate what I heard from Jan, is that in terms of meeting our 2025 goal, we have a revised target, it sounds like, of getting 1,000 households switched, correct? And that's a new goal, sounds like. Jan, am I incorrect in that?
We are working, yes, we are working with the Sustainability Division, CSEC, and other partners towards that goal.
And so I just want to remind the board that that part of our strategy is aligned with all those other strategies. And that, Jan, I trust that to the degree there's something the board needs to do to help support that goal, that will be a future topic for us. Obviously, adoption of air source heat pumps are our key topic, so we'll continue to talk about that. But there's nothing else at this point that the board needs to be aware of relative to resource needs or planning.
Well, I think one of the things that the board needs to keep in mind is funding for the rebates, right? So as we increase the rebates, we'll have more rebates, more expense, and we'll have to look at that. So that is something that will come up as we move forward.
Dave, just a comment. As we think about the town establishing goals, we need to remind the town that we have those goals, and so there should be funding impact for us. So I'm trusting we won't make a commitment unless we've got the funding to do that, or you'll bring it to the board as a potential funding need for 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, and that will be done through the budget process. We did that for the 2022 budget. So there's funding in there. The piece that is probably not concerning, but if we're wildly successful with adoption, we'll be over the target, and that'll have an impact on the bottom line in the budget. So we've had that happen in the past with solar, where we were given rebates and we forecasted X amount, and we just had a big surge, and which was a good problem to have, and we could have the same scenario here. So just keep that in the back of your mind.
Thank you. Pam, yeah, I saw your hand raised. Pam?
This is for Jan, and it may seem a little in the weeds, but if there is a problem here, it is a big problem. And I just want clarification on heat pumps and refrigerants. I understand there is leakage of what may be very powerful CFC type synthetic gases that have incredible greenhouse gas potential. And I just wonder, are you, and I will confess, I raised this question when I was seeking guidance on installing a heat pump myself, and I'm very in favor of these, but I think is there a quiet little environmental problem here, or should I just say, forget it, there's no problem? But if there are CFC type synthetics that are leaking, they have the potential to be so much more significant than carbon dioxide, for example, that even a tiny amount of them will completely wipe out any benefit. So forgive me, Jan, for this question, but I just want to dispose of it.
It's a good question, and we are aware of it. Abode has taken a look. So there's really two parts of this question. One of them is the heat pump installed properly so that leakage is minimized? And Abode does do this QA check after installation. They do ask questions about installation best practices. And by the way, Mass Save will be requiring training for all of the installers that work on systems that are going to receive Mass Save rebates. That training will kick in as a requirement in 2023. So there's a real awareness that good installations are key to minimizing leakage. And what Abode has said to us is that if the installation is done properly, that leakage over time should not make a heat pump any more a heat pump shouldn't contribute any more to climate change than a gas heating system. That's sort of the upper limit that we would see. But obviously, we want to do everything we can to make sure that leakage is below that level.
So they're saying if the installation is proper, and I would imagine also follow-up maintenance isn't proper and monitoring is proper, that the leakage from the very, 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 very powerful CFC type synthetics will not exceed the benefits from the leakage. Is that what you're telling me?
That's what we're being told, yes.
And I guess my only comment, and I do think this is kind of board level, is just that there needs to be, it seems to me, great assurance that installation and monitoring is adequate because of the very different numerical or quantitative impacts of the refrigerants. And for those of you who may not, I trust everyone knows about this issue, but this is a major, major issue in terms of the potency of greenhouse gases and the power of these compared to the power of carbon dioxide or to a lesser extent methane. So I think it's really important to keep that. Jan, I know that you're way on top of it and I appreciate that, but just I would feel more comfortable if you were confident that installation, monitoring, and knowledge of this particular issue was really in your wheelhouse, so that we could tap into it and ask you, like, is this really working okay, and should we be delaying installation until you, Jan, are confident that the whole process actually is working the way it really needs to work. So with that, I'll just stop here, but thank you very much for taking my question.
So Pam, Drawdown, a book written a couple of years ago, talks about the actions that could be taken to address climate change. Refrigeration was their number one, but it does, as you point out, require management because of the potency of those gases. But refrigeration is a major strategy towards reduction of greenhouse gases, but that risk exists. I wanted to add in a comment about that similar risk, the global warming potential of these compounds. There is sulfur hexafluoride is used in a lot of switchgear in distribution systems and in substations. That is a very powerful gas as well. And it's 23,000 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So making sure that as a utility, we're monitoring that as a risk as well, that those switchgear and the transformers and so forth. There's also, the EPA has put a lot of industry rules in place. Like if your heat pump installer releases the gas into a rag like they used to, that's a $20,000 fine. So there's a lot of regulation already in existence, but we should make sure that we're compliant with that.
I get that, and I know that EPA is doing what it's doing, having been involved in a lot of that. But I also know that the implementation of enforcement mechanisms and all of that are uneven. I just want to make the last sort of aphorism type comment, which is that protections in the environmental field are a story of unintended consequences. And unintended consequences are always what cause us to regulate environmental issues. And I think with heat pumps, you've got something that may be a little less regulated at the moment and also is taking off, and it's a very good time for all of us to be mindful of this particular extremely powerful component of our greenhouse gas problem. So thanks, Jan. Just cheerleading here, that's all.
Gordon?
I just did a quick Google for the refrigerants that Mitsubishi uses, and there are a bunch of them, and some of them are better than others. But that aside, this is a perfect example of where the light plant and Abode and the coaches and so forth, but particularly at the people with expertise can sort through this information and steer us clear without imposing the burden of having to do a search like I just did, which then leads to more searches and more evaluation of technical material and so forth. So that was a great question, Pam. If we can head this thing off at the pass, that'd be great.
Pam, I think you raised a very important observation on heat pumps, and I just have one more ask, which we do not have to answer today. Jan, in your comment, you referred to that from a boat's perspective, the leakage over time would not contribute more than a gas heating system. That statement alone concerns me because I would really like it to be a lot better than a gas system. So at some point, I'd like to understand a little bit more about that real risk on the emissions. So we do not have to talk about that here now. So just because the public heard it, I'm sure there'll be some follow-up on that. So thank you. This point, it's a little 7 past 9. I'm going to keep going. I wanted to move forward and talk a little bit about the utility school. On the EV is the sort of next topic that was reviewed. I know that we're making efforts to support the multi-dwelling unit installations. I think this has been an issue that the board has been trying to support. This is in the EVs. And Dave, just remind me, we did a pilot for opportunity for 3 multi-dwelling units to implement some changes. And I think we did, 2 of them were pursued, right? If I recall.
Yeah, we did do 3. One was, a shared charging station, and there was 2 other projects that Jan was heavily involved with. So Jan, do you want to speak to those 2?
I guess probably this, Jan, just as a comment, is I think this is going to continue to be an issue for the board, and we're going to continue to get issues raised about needing to support the multi-dwelling units. That's just my observation.
Right, so the business electric vehicle rate plan that's mentioned at the bottom of this slide applies to multi-dwelling unit properties as well. So they can also take advantage of that program.
All right, well, thank you, Jen. I know that the board has made an effort to address this issue, but there is some dependency on the multi-dwelling unit to support this for their customers as well. So we've made an effort here, and I'm not saying this isn't our strategy, but I think the board's done a lot to try to address this concern, and obviously we've had a lot of success with EVs. So like you said, this might be a good problem to have, but. Okay.
So to follow up on that, Jan, so the installations are complete at those 2 sites for the pilot?
They are ongoing. So Center Village is waiting for warmer weather to do the final trenching for their project. And Riverwalk at the moment is trying to resolve some issues with placement of meters that they need to resolve within their condominium association.
Okay. So it's at the HOA level that they're stalled.
That is one element we're dealing with.
Yeah, sorry to use stalled. I mean paused or waiting on the HOA, not on Concord Light.
there is likely to be some additional, a small amount of additional engineering design work that needs to be done for that project once the HOA issues are straightened out. And we will
And-
do our best to facilitate that.
And so when another multi-dwelling unit or a complex comes to Concord Light and says, we would like to do something like what was done in the pilot, you're able to offer them technical assistance based on the pilot, and you're able, is there any kind of, you said the workplace charging program will apply to them. How do deeded spots work into that program?
Well, Dave, I don't know if you want to speak to this. It's my understanding that we were going to complete these pilot projects, assess the outcome in terms of adoption, EV adoption at those locations over some period of time. We're not offering the design services going forward at this time.
Yes.
However, there's the, go ahead.
I wasn't asking for Concord Light to do more design services. That was what the pilot was to do. But the knowledge learned in doing those pilots, you can share with the HOA. You can say, this is an example of what we did here, and here's some estimated costs to put in mind, and you can get them going as a community group, as an HOA on this.
Yeah, we can. And the one thing I would add here is that each multi-dwelling unit is different.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff would apply, some of it wouldn't. And that's really the challenge that we faced going through those processes. Everyone is slightly different. Some are very different, and some are just slightly. So we can apply some of it, but I don't know that all of it will apply.
Okay. Wendy, do you mind if I ask a question not on EVs? What was that?
Sequential order so that we know when we pick this back up, where we want to pick back up.
Okay.
You don't mind?
So EV adoption, I would just make a comment. I think it's going very well. I think it's driven by community support, Concord Light, education, but really the market is growing so fast is a big help too. So it's the right moment for Concord to be pushing EVs, and I'm glad to see the progress. One other suggestion would be putting an insert into the excise tax bills about the EV miles program. Having so many people not, if I'm reading this chart correctly, not on one of our scheduled charging programs, that would be a concern for me as a board member, because they would come home and that's right when we get that unicorn peak and they're adding to it. So I'll wait for my the next slides for my next questions.
And I'll just note that it's almost 9:15, and I think this might be a good place to stop, because when we get into the use, I'd like to move on to utility scale storage. We'll start there in our next
Could I,
discussion.
sorry, Wendy, can I make some comments that don't have slides before we move on?
Sure, but I'm just gonna, I am mindful of time. I want to make sure that citizens have time.
This may tee up conversation for next month. So first is the targets that Concord has as a town for an 80% reduction by 2050 were based on the Global Warming Solutions Act. The state, with their new roadmap, has updated that to a net zero target. That doesn't mean Concord has changed its target, but it's something that we should consider, that the state has advanced that target. The other things I want to talk about were on-bill financing and distributed storage. I know that CAB is working hard on-bill financing for working with the light plant on strategies. And I know that we have in our climate plan virtual power plants or home battery storage systems. I think that is still far off, but it is something we should have in the CMLP plan. And the decarbonization assessment, I had a question about that. Who's doing the home decarbonization planning assessment and follow-up? Is that Concord Light staff? Is that Abode? Is that E&E?
Abode.
Abode. Okay, so Abode will be the point on that. And then I do have a question on the last slide about solar, but if you want to hold that until next time, we can do that.
Don't mind that. I'd like to hold it off. And I guess just two more comments, because you did talk about the changing standards for the states, and then obviously the town's goals. I just want to comment on two things. Part of when we have these follow-up discussions, we'll also be talking about the town resiliency goals, because as we saw under the solar generation, Laura talked about the target of 25 megawatts. I just want to correct that comment there, because really the updated target that I saw in the goal was in the plan was 20 megawatts. So we will review that in our follow-up discussion. So I just want to comment on that. And then in that same plan, the battery storage has 60 megawatt hours of capacity in that plan. So when we resume our discussion, those will be topics that we'll include in our discussions as well. Because part of the strategy is making sure that we're mindful of those targets and how we're meeting them, which Laura, thank you. You did address that specifically. Although I'll also say that the resiliency plan was specific to saying solar generation on town property. So there's just a qualifier there. So I'll just comment on that, because that actually is also the focus of Article 38, that this is town specific solar generation. So just comment on that. Okay, so I think this is a good stopping point, and what I'd like to do now is sort of open up to our citizenry additional comments, unless the board has other comments at this time. No. Okay, so let me open up the floor to comments. Pamela Dritt, I do see your hand is raised.
Good morning, Pamela, 13 Concord Green. Is there a place where we can, I guess because the meeting is recorded, we can go and see the presentation again by reviewing the recordings, is that right?
Yeah, it will be posted online at Minuteman Media Network. So
Are there places where we could get like your report and the other things that used to be handouts, physical handouts, like the planning board does with the documents that are discussed during planning board meetings?
yeah, we can distribute the director's update if you're interested in a copy of it.
Well, I mean, is there a place online on the town website that we go to look at all the documents that are discussed here, like the packet that the boards get?
Yeah, we haven't done that yet. It's a good suggestion. We'll have to take that under advisement.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. I have a whole bunch of questions, and so I just want to read them, and it's more than my share time. But I also, Concord Green is about to repave the roads in the development. That is going to mean that no trenching under the roads will be allowed for anything. The board told us that they were planning to put conduit to the parking sheds, which would allow electrification to be brought there so that owners could install EV charging, but they decided it's too expensive. It would cost, according to the Concord Green Condo Association, about $400,000 to put conduit to bring electricity to the parking shed. They'd rather do a set of, and that would allow 196 units to install EV charging. Right now, Concord Green only has 24 units that have the ability to charge at home. Is there some way that we could help with the cost of that so they'll do it? I'd be willing to finance it even, but they're planning to spend a lot of money without having, we need EV charging there, home charging capability for most of the people there. And if we could get some help with that installation, the conduit electrification of the parking shed installations, so that individual owners could then pay to have the meters and all installed as needed.
Your other topics, I hear your concern. So I'm just noting, and there's 3 other people with comments. So, and if needed,
Okay.
just want to comment, feel free to put these in writing so that we make sure that we get those comments and we can revisit them as well. But if you have other quick comments.
How can you work with the planning board to incentivize all electric new construction? Because it needs to be incentivized, because we can't require it in our building codes because of the mass state law. Are we gradually raising the electricity charge in order to finance the infrastructure investments we need, such as the middle school, electric buses, industrial battery, heat pump incentives, all electric building incentives, et cetera? Low electricity rates are not the main, not the only good goal. We also need the climate change mitigation, and CMLP needs the money for that. Is the future potential of electric school buses included in the future plan? The storage and the grid balancing, that they can be used as mobile batteries? Do we have a way to incentivize maximum local solar installations, including battery backup? Will our new meters allow us to control residential use 2-way? How do we figure the cost of solar? I was disturbed that residential was so much more expensive than grid. Does it include the reduction in overall energy costs and the distributed storage savings, reduction of need to buy electricity, particularly at peak times? Does it include the solar customers' ability to take advantage of time of use rates by getting paid to put power onto the grid right when we need it? Net time of use metering. How many residential solar installations have battery backup now? Do we have grid balancing management capability at CMLP now? And/or are we planning to have it in the future? There are utilities in Massachusetts right now using residential batteries as cumulative peaker plants, where people opt in to allow the power company to draw from their residential batteries as they need. And by getting paid to put power onto the grid right when we need it. And they can draw it from the residential batteries in a way that doesn't interfere with the homeowner's usage. That's it.
I think you repeatedly asked some of the same questions again and again. I think it behooves us to put some of that in writing back to you, so you don't have to keep asking the same question. So we'll make an attempt to follow up on that where we can. Okay. Dean, have you?
I'm here.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Dean Banfield, 73 Walden Terrace. Quick disclaimer, I'm a member of the Finance Committee, but I am speaking for myself. I don't represent any other group or individual, and I don't represent the Finance Committee in these comments. End of disclaimer. Okay, so we didn't get to the, to the strategic thing, which is the solar component that my petition article is addressing. So I'm going to be very brief, and hopefully we can have a separate meeting to discuss that. But the thing I guess I'd like to just point out is that in the presentation around the solar issue that my article specifically addresses, we need to be fairly crisp about the various metrics that we are talking about. The presentation I saw today merged a lot of things together, aggregated them into a net number, and said, hey, we're making our numbers. The climate action plan is very distinct. It has disaggregated rooftop solar targets, in-town property targets, and greenhouse gas reduction targets. So these are distinct things, and they can't just be all bundled together and say, hey, we did it. We bought some stuff out here. We did this, we did that. We're making our numbers. So that's one. Number two, the strategic plan, you also can't, change the goalposts when you're saying, here was what our original target was, and here's where we are. In the strategic plan 18 through 25, it indicates on page 5 that the target for 2020 greenhouse gas aggregate reduction would be 100% through REC purchases. You can't come back today and say the target was 2021 and we're not going to make that. And in 2022, we hope to be at 98. The plan said 2020. So just say that. Say we're not on the dime, but don't restate the original target in contradiction to the plan. So that's that. Outside the fence line purchases are part of that overall greenhouse gas /REC reduction program, and they should not be included in any conversation about things that are happening in town. So to add them in and say we're making our target is, how else are we going to make our greenhouse gas reduction target total? We're going to have to buy green energy from these kinds of sources. So that's implied by having that. So I just hope that we can have a conversation at whatever your next meeting is, where we are talking about things in their own buckets and not just saying, let's put them all together and claim victory. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. You may have missed the fact at the beginning of this meeting, we talked about having an ad hoc meeting where the goal will be to have a discussion on.
I'm sorry, Wendy. I understood that as the meeting went on that there would be another meeting, but when we get to that meeting, I don't want to hear the same sort of merged goals and achievement conversation again. So I'm just trying to try to have us talk about the things in the context in which at least that the citizens have access to. If there's other interim goals that are not available to the citizens, that's a different thing. But in terms of the paperwork that's available to citizens, we need to be talking about the goals that are established. That's all.
Oh, I hear you, and the discussion on Article 38 will be specific to the wording in your article. The purpose of this meeting today is really a review and evaluation of the original strategic plan, and we need to re-baseline what our commitments are and what's realistic and what's practical, given what we know the market can bear right now and all the priorities that we have as a plan. So again, this is a discussion for the board to get up to speed on where we are and what our priorities need to be. So we'll continue this discussion going forward. So solar is clearly there though, but your comments are well understood. The next, Jerry, wait a sec. Can I just, I want to be specific. So I'm going to go through the first. I had Jerry. Frankel had his hand up, so I'd like to go in order. Sorry, we'll get to Charlie, to your comment.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Jerry Frankel, 132 Jenny Dugan Road, Chair of CSEC. I have a question regarding the cost data presented, comparing residential PV costs to grid scale PV costs. Laura, since you presented this, I'll direct the question to you, but anyone can answer, I suppose. What is involved? How is the residential cost calculated? What are the constituent pieces of that? And to whom who pays that cost?
So Jerry, thank you for your question. Admittedly, fairly quick analysis that I did started with assumptions from NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. They will provide for a certain longitude and latitude and elevation, which I used for Concord, a specific residence within Concord. You can put in a DC system size, and it will provide an array tilt, azimuth, expected system losses, inverter efficiency, DC to AC, size ratio, and a capacity factor, and an hourly production profile, which I used to calculate the benefits of the solar to reducing the transmission and capacity costs of the light plant. So that 9.5 cents had been reduced because the solar plant was providing value during those hours. Admittedly, not as much because the peak is typically 6 to 7 p.m. and the maximum solar production is earlier in the day. I also took the benefit of reduced losses into account from in-town solar production by grossing up the imported solar by the system losses, so that spread between the 9.5 and the 5.5 cents included the benefit of not having any losses from the in-town solar.
So I've used the NREL site myself. I'm pretty familiar with that. I guess my question really pertains to whose costs are those? The slide appears to, in its structure, appears to imply that we're comparing apples to apples. That is, the cost of utility scale storage would be borne by CMLP, and that the cost of residential solar would also be borne by CMLP. That's the implication of the way it's presented. But I don't think that's actually what those costs represent. And that's what my question is about.
So no, if that's the implication, I apologize, because what I tried to accomplish was a mere economic analysis, not about who pays, but the true cost of in-town solar, because a solar customer is going to pay a different amount because they're paying a retail rate. I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at true economic cost.
I recognize that, but I think for clarification purposes, it would be better to make sure that the figures represent the cost to a particular entity, whether that entity is CMLP or that entity is some other group, such as individual consumers. But I recognize that was not your intent, but I do want to point out that that slide is very confusing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perhaps there's a way to clarify that for a future meeting. We can consider that. David Allen, I'll just recognize we're after 9:30, so not to cut you short, I'm just recognizing it. That's all. Thank you, David.
Yeah, appreciate not being cut short, but
Yeah.
I've only got 3 little bits, so it'll be darn short. On the update about Concord Broadband, I want to say how enormously appreciative and grateful I am at this news, at this new path forward. I now, especially now, feel comfortable that we have a way forward for Concord Broadband that might be quite successful. Thank you. In the middle of the slide presentation, there was a chart showing the various MLPs. We need to be loud and clear. Concord has done damn well. That spike over to the left compared with all the other MLPs. Let's just keep it up. And finally, a question, not for now, but for when we get to talking about fixed component to the bill. You've never heard about this from me, have you? Oh, no, you've heard about it constantly, haven't you? I'd like to pose a question for those who think that an approach in which we gradually increase up to $70, which is the actual amount, why it is you think that we should be gradual instead of just going there. Enough. And again, let me come back and say thank you very much about Concord Broadband.
So David, thank you. You always do a great job in recognizing the accomplishments of the team, and they really have done a phenomenal job. So Dave, to you and the team, really, there is a lot that's been accomplished. So, you know, this review today has been very helpful in recognizing that. So again, kudos to the team for that. I wanted to go back. I can't see Charlie Parker. I don't know if he still has his hand raised or wanted to make a comment. I can't
I
tell.
think he dropped off.
Okay, all right. Okay, so with that, I know we're past our hour. Any additional questions, comments, or observations from the board?
I just wanted to, Jerry kind of touched on the comments I'm holding for the next meeting. But yeah, we should have a deeper discussion about that topic of who pays for what with solar and how much does it affect Concord Light, because there's operational effects for in-town solar and so forth. So I'll hold and we'll talk about it next time.
Thank you. So this has been a great discussion. If people do have questions pertaining to the strategy and presentation, it would be helpful to get those questions in advance and we make sure that we cover them in our ad hoc meeting, which is still to be scheduled. We'll get that done. And we will also in that ad hoc meeting, and we'll make sure that Dean is aware of it as well. We'll be talking about our vote for Article 38, as well as the light plant article for the budget and the pilot. So that'll be our agenda for the ad hoc meeting. Okay. All right. With that, I think I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, hey, Wendy,
Yeah?
I've been taking pretty good notes today, so I'd be willing to do the clerk role again. I think I've got most of this written down. So
I would, that's great. If I was supposed to do March, but I'm happy to cede that to you, Gordon. I would love it if you did that. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
We appreciate that, Gordon. I have taken some pretty copious notes as well, so appreciate that. We'll assume you'll take the lead on that. Thank you. This is an important discussion that we get documented correctly and accurately, so thank you. Okay, I will still entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I second.
Thank you, Pam. We'll take a roll call. Brian?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
And Wendy. Thank you. And thank you all for staying a little bit later. Great discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Wendy.